everyone, welcome back to another episode of A Perspective. This is MJ speaking, and thank you so much for coming back to another episode of the podcast. Thank you so much for coming back, you guys. It has been a long time. I'm so sorry for the little hiatus that was taken on the podcast. Unfortunately, the last couple of weeks leading up to my MCAT exam, which some of you may know I took a couple of weeks ago, were very busy with a lot of studying stuff, a lot of life stuff, a lot of back to school stuff. My parents and my sister and I took a trip to end off the summer, so it was a hectic couple of weeks. So I apologize for the pause on this account. It really, I've missed it so much, and I've missed chatting with you guys and being behind the mic and just getting to chat to the amazing guests that I've had the opportunity to have on here. So I'm excited to be back. I am back at school full time, and I'm hoping to be able to contribute way more time to the podcast and to bring you guys content that you want to hear and that I think would be useful for people to hear. So I'm super excited to be back here. The MCAT, for those of you who might be curious, went okay. I didn't walk out feeling as confident as I would have liked, just because it definitely was harder than some of the practice exams that I had been taking up until the exam, which I guess is to be expected. But I'm keeping my fingers crossed, and I feel like I have prepared for the best and the worst. I think it's important to remind yourself that at the end of the day, what matters the most is the time and dedication and devotion that was invested into studying for the exam and preparing for it. And, the mark is only a reflection of, is not a reflection of what your worth is or how intelligent you are. And I'm really trying to remind myself of that. So fingers crossed, it could go both ways, but I'm excited, and I will let you guys know as soon as I know. And a lot of you expressed interest in potentially me recording an episode on the MCAT, what I did to prepare for it, keeping mental health in check. So if that's something that you guys are still interested in, comment something in the podcast comment section, or you can shoot me a DM on Instagram with any specific questions you may have. I would be super happy to answer them. And as an aside, another of the reasons why you may not have heard me as much on here, aside from all the other hectic life stuff, is because my best friend Christine and I also started another podcast called the You Writing This Down podcast. So if I'm not on here, chances are that I'm also over on that end recording with her and bringing you guys some really, really cool and insightful conversations that I think you would really enjoy. So you can check us out at You Writing This Down podcast on Instagram and on Facebook, or you can search up the You Writing This Down podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Really, it's distributed pretty much everywhere. So if you don't find me here, chances are I'm over there. So don't forget to check it out. Before we get started with today's episode, I want to take a moment to respectfully acknowledge that I am recording this episode from the unceded traditional land of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, as well as the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Wasanic nations. And I am super happy to be back here and attending my university on this beautiful land. It is such a bright, beautiful community, and I look forward to continuing to contribute to the conversation around colonization, what that was, what it has meant for the Indigenous peoples in Canada and all over the world, really, and to continue shedding light on these difficult conversations. It has been a year of a lot of discovery around what was done to Indigenous peoples, and I think that as an uninvited settler myself, along with other people, it's important to keep shedding light to these conversations and to keep contributing to the awareness around these topics so that we can continue to create a community that is equal for everybody and to ensure that everybody is getting the acknowledgement that they deserve and need. So without further ado, I am very excited to be bringing you guys this conversation with Mikah Jones today. Mikah is such an inspiring beam of light in the Instagram community, in the world, and now I feel really lucky to say in my life, we've become really good friends over Instagram, which is one of the joys of having a social media account. You get to meet people from everywhere and connect and talk and get to know each other. And his content is really inspiring. If you don't follow him on Instagram, you totally should. On TikTok as well. I will link his social media accounts in the comment section. But this episode was just a bomb of knowledge. And I wish you guys could have seen me. This was recorded over Zoom, but my facial expressions during this episode were just something else because I could not believe all the amazing things he was saying half the time. So I hope you enjoy this conversation just as much as I did. And without further ado, let's get right into it. Mikah Jones, how's it going? It has been a long time coming. Thank you for being here.
Of course, of course, of course. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be here.
How are we doing today?
I am doing quite amazing today, not gonna lie.
Yeah.
I learned a bunch of new things about self-love and like how to give yourself love and like through breath works in different ways and different positions in yoga. That shit took away all the thoughts in my head. Super cool, super cool.
Would you mind sharing one or two things with us?
So I learned two things. I would suggest there's a girl named Hitomi. If you look her up on YouTube, she's really good for stuff like that. I don't know how to pronounce her last name, to be honest. I just don't.
Okay.
So I'll just say Hitomi. That's a rare name. Ain't nobody ever going to see that, right? That will definitely show up.
Mm-hmm.
When you have your torso always facing down, whether that's like child's pose, if you know what that is, or like just stretching your hamstrings or anything, that brings up something called prana, which is like your lower abdomen's energy. And energy in this case is like love, right? So when you're doing that, you're actually pouring love into yourself doing that. You ground yourself. It's a grounding energy. I thought that was really cool. I tried it.
Very
and it
interesting.
Worked.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah,
we should all go. I'm gonna go check that out. That sounds incredible. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing.
I'll send you the video link after this.
Please do. And I will post it in the episode comments for anybody who's interested as well.
Bingo. There we go.
Well, before we dive into this much anticipated conversation that I'm very excited for, I like to give my guests a little bit of a shout out every time I interview them, because I feel like I interview like very special people on here. You guys can't see Mikah, but he's dancing right now. Mikah and I got in touch over Instagram. One of the beauties of having social media accounts that you just get to meet people from all over the world. And you have a very large follower base on both Instagram and on TikTok, and you've become famous through your videos that you create. And you are such a beaming light of joy in the world and on Instagram in general. Genuinely, every time I log in, it makes me so happy to see the content that you post, just because you have a way of expressing your thoughts about self-improvement and self-development in such a unique way, and in such a, you're always smiling in your videos, and I smile every time I see your videos. So A, thank you for being here, and B, thank you for the content that you're putting onto the world, because genuinely it is like it's like filling a lot of dents that I think that the mindfulness community has become very uniform, and you are adding a new dimension to it that I think we all need to see. So thank you for everything that you're doing. It's great.
Well, that means a lot. You know, from my point of view, I'm always like when I let my mind go crazy, I'm always freaking out that I'm not doing the right thing, that it's this imposter syndrome, this and that, just all like a bunch of crazy stuff. But it really helps when people tell me that what I'm doing is unique and it's helping them, and that means a lot. That means more than you know.
No, of course. Well, and we will dive a lot into that within this episode. But first, I want to know, and I'm sure the people listening want to know, if you can tell us your story about how you got to where you are today in your life and on your social media journey.
Okay. So I'm going to do me as a person, and then I'll do that. I'll do social media separate. So, I mean, I was born in Tarzana, California. So it's like just a place in San Fernando Valley. Oh shoot, we got the matching glasses. Okay, look at that.
We do. I can't not wear glasses while I'm looking at my screen, unfortunately, without getting a headache.
There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with it. I love the glasses. I hate not wearing glasses, to be honest.
The glasses suit you. They look really good on you. So
thank you. You as well.
Thank you. You guys can't see us, but you hopefully see it in the clips I'm going to post later. So
yes.
We'll have our matching glasses.
All right, let's go.
Nice. Very nice.
And I grew up in a household where I don't really like using labels, but I'll describe it for this sake to make it easier. My father is a alcoholic, abusive, manipulator, narcissist, like all four of those. And I grew up around that energy like my whole life, or at least for the first 18 years of my life.
And you're 19.
I am 19. Yes. That means I am not near this man anymore. Thank the Lord. I'm not religious, by the way, but I just do that because I can. All right.
No, but I mean, I say that because you say the first 18 years of your life, but you're 19, which means that there's only been change recently in your life
Oh
around
yeah,
that. Mm-hmm.
I played basketball. That was my main sport when I was growing up. I always played sports. I got really burnt out with that sport around the age of 11. However,
Mm-hmm.
with a manipulative father, use leverage over you. So I played it till I was 14, 15. I did
Mm-hmm.
swimming. Those are all just like sports and things. But
Mm-hmm.
my journey of how I got to where I am, I'd probably say really started when I was about 14. I was
Mm-hmm.
about 6 years into depression. And I was just kind of fed up, like when you see other people be happy, when you see and you're around other people's families and you realize your family is not like that,
Mm-hmm.
they don't yell at each other at the table. They don't beat each other up. Like that's not like a thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's very different. And it made me, in a way, start to notice that, okay, what the environment I'm in is not good. But I knew that I'm 14. I can't get a job or anything. I can't just leave the house. It's not an option. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, I have to figure out a way to create a version of myself that is not affected by that environment. And I know
Mm-hmm.
that's a ridiculous thought to have at 14 years old. But in all honesty,
Mm-hmm.
I never really like I always felt like I was years ahead of like everyone that was my age. Like I was by I think fourth grade, I was like the dating coach for every single person from the ages fourth grade to eighth grade. Yeah, I'm being serious. And that's
We're
because
starting them young. We're starting them
we
young.
starting them young. We starting them young. Yes, because I mean, for me, I was like my dad's therapist growing up,
Mm.
and that's a horrible
Wow.
thing. FYI, everyone, that is a horrible thing.
This
That is
doesn't
not
feel very
anything
good.
any child should be doing. But
Mm-hmm.
for me, I learned about people. I learned how to observe people very well, and it's not like I was in a bunch of relationships in fourth grade and I knew all my shit. No, 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 no.
Mm-hmm.
It was more
Mm-hmm.
so I watch what happens, the behavior, and you just tell them that what's happening,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that only progressed, and I became more and more of like a therapy friend, and I created the version of me that was Michael at the time, right? That's my
Mm-hmm.
original name, but Micah is the name that I go by personally,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
which actually that's actually a really big thing. And I know I'm jumping all over the place, but I'm a person who kind of talks as I
It's
flow. I
okay.
just talk with the
It's
flow.
okay. We like to hear from all dimensions. You're good.
Yes, yes,
You're
yes.
good. Mm-hmm.
There was a guy that I followed. I think I was like about 16. He's still on the internet now. His name's Charlie.
Okay.
Um, he used to go by Charlie the Rocket, and he told me
Mm.
about this idea that kind of blew my mind. To be honest, he's
Mm-hmm.
like, in order for you to be able to be the version of yourself that you want, you have to create him as a superhero, right? Because the
Mm.
person that you are right now, right? This little kid that's broken, hurt, all this trauma and everything, therapy friend just doesn't know how to handle their life very well.
Mm-hmm.
You have to create the version of yourself that is the hero, and they come to save them. And
Mm-hmm.
then eventually you become the hero. And
Okay.
that's the great part.
Wow.
And Micah was that person. And I just kind of saved Michael. And now I'm Micah. And Micah's gone through ups and downs, and he's, still had to be there and help Michael get up as well.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I'd say my spiritual journey started around 15. I
Okay.
had a best friend of mine that I've had since and this is through basketball.
Nice.
Um, I knew him from like I was like 8 years old, but me and his dad, after I get bored of playing video games, I go and talk to his dad, and he showed me this book called The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, and that book
Mm.
changed my life through the roof.
Okay.
And that was
Very
how I
nice.
started to learn that, oh shoot, I can make changes here. I can
Mm.
control here, and I can be happy. I can live a happy life, a peaceful life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that book kind of sent me down the rabbit hole of meditation, breathwork, and just the spiritual practices and journey in general.
Mm-hmm.
And in all honesty, those start to progress over time. You go through like the stages of the spiritual awakening, if you're familiar with that at all, like the
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
phase of like
Mm-hmm.
depression, which happens a lot, actually, to be honest. It happens a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and you just kind of just keep going up. I think about it more so like a roller coaster,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're going up, and once you hit the top, that's like the peak of your high, right? And that's because you're at the high because you've learned all the information that you've learned, right?
Mm-hmm.
About how to be happy, and you're a happy person. Maybe the things in your life are great, but then you're going to go back down. You're going to go down.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, not farther. You're going to go farther down than you did the first time.
Yeah.
And you're going to be in a very deep depression, lots of problems, lots of things rising within yourself. But all that does is essentially allow you to start the process of going back up again.
Exactly.
You can just keep doing it over and over and over and over. And honestly, I feel like I'm not answering your question.
You are.
I really feel like I'm not, though.
No. Keep talking. You're getting there. Okay. You're getting there. We're at 15. Now we got to go through 16, 17, 18, 19.
Yes. And that process, I'd probably say, kept going through like 15, 16, 17. You probably have to ask me questions in order for me to get the information out about what I learned during those ages, to be honest. But that just kept happening, and I just kept, in a way, cutting people out of my life, getting rid of relationships. And then when I turned 17, that's when I really started to see my father for who he was, and that there was nothing I could do to change him or anything. But I knew that I had to get myself away from him. So I set up like this pretty mischievous plan, to be honest. I kind of put myself in a situation to be perceived as the asshole to him. Because, you know, when you have a very abusive father, he's not just going to let you leave the house. That's not like a thing. But you have to make it right in their psyche for that to happen. So what I did was I essentially pissed him off enough to the point where he kicked me out. And it worked. I had another place to stay lined up with my grandma, so that worked out. But in all honesty, the journey is still happening. I am 19 years old. I have so much more to learn. I have so many more lows that are going to happen, so many more highs that are going to happen. And my story, I guess you could say, is I decided to choose thinking outside the box rather than inside the box. And the moment I did that, it allowed for me to go on this journey a lot better. It's a lonely journey. It's very lonely. Your friends don't really know what the fuck you're talking about, like, all the time. Your family has no idea what's going on with you. It's a very lonely journey. And for me, that's where social media came in the mix. When I was about a freshman, sophomore. When I was a sophomore, I started a TikTok account. And, you know, for the time, I just thought I wanted to do comedy videos. I tried out a bunch of shit, to be honest. And some of my old friends, they have some of the videos I wish no one on the internet to ever see, ever. Because they're like, it's just like ridiculously funny, but it's also like, that was you. You know, like, they're so different personalities.
I'm sure everybody listening can relate to that in some level, so you're good. Don't worry. No like judgment.
Little pictures of me when I was in 6th grade. Oh God, bad stuff, man. Bad stuff. I mean, I went through.
We're all gonna go online and look them up after this.
I don't even know the names, so if you find them, I have no access to those accounts. So you just do what you please. Do what you please with the information.
Doesn't matter to anymore. It's okay.
No, that I got rid of it. If I hold on to that information, that becomes bad. That becomes real bad.
Well said. Well said.
And I was going through depression really bad, probably my sophomore year. Like, it was pretty shitty for me. I had swimming and everything, but I don't know, just my overall perspective on life was just shit. It was really bad. And because of that, you know, I had like all these problems with like losing friends and all that. That didn't help, right? I already believed myself to be the victim in my life. And throughout the years, I'd probably say 12 to 14, I also had like a live streaming account that had like, I don't know what, 800,000 followers or some crazy amount.
No, only.
Look, I've grown stuff like for a very long time. So it's like numbers are just numbers sometimes for me. And, you know, there I learned about my personality and how I wanted to represent myself on the internet. While at the same time, that prepared me for TikTok. So I used TikTok as a platform to express my emotions because I didn't think my friends would understand, and I did not want to burden them with that information. The classic idea of depression, right? Being a burden. So I used the internet. And those videos you won't even find on this account. That was like a page that I made before that had like 3.5 million followers. Because TikTok was very new, right? Like, TikTok was new at the time, and I joined on. And there wasn't anyone in the niche that was doing what I was doing, right? I was literally stating how I felt. But the problem with that was, and this is what I will say, is it became popular to be depressed. Like
Mm-hmm.
the amount of validation I was receiving from those problems
Mm-hmm.
was ridiculous. It really, in fact, it was probably the worst thing that's ever happened to me in a way.
Wow, really?
Yeah, because think about it, right? And let's say you make a video about like depression, right? Let me move this a little bit closer. Let's get a little bit more immersed, right? Imagine
Mm-hmm.
you make a video about depression, right? And like you're stating literally your pain, and
Mm-hmm.
that gets 800,000 likes. The first video.
Mm-hmm.
That's like, in a way, in
Damn.
your psyche, that's like, okay. And you know, being a young kid, you want approval, right? I didn't receive
Mm-hmm.
love from my father. I received the wrong kind of love, right? So
Yeah.
I just seeked approval subconsciously. So for me, that just meant, okay, how I feel right now is perfect because it's giving me the validation that I want.
Yeah.
So I
Uh-huh.
just kept making videos, just kept putting them out. And I mixed in my advice information because that was also another thing that gave me consistent approval. My
Mm-hmm.
friendships in my life, all of them, every single one of them,
Mm-hmm.
they don't ever come to me or check up on me. But that's also, you know, knowing this now because of the way that I built the relationship with them,
Mm.
right? It was a very one-time transaction or a one-way transaction where like
Okay.
I'd always say I would always appear to be fine,
Mm-hmm.
you know, appear, and that's like a normal thing for most people. Appear to be
Mm-hmm.
okay, appear to be fine. And then I drop some fucking amazing advice on them. And I'm not saying that to boast, but they literally tell me that.
Mm-hmm.
They'd be like, you
Mm-hmm.
changed my fucking life with this hour of conversation, you know, or like
Mm-hmm.
something. And
Mm-hmm.
I essentially created an entire brand out of that.
Mm-hmm.
However, that's not like a good thing. It's not, I didn't know how to
Yeah.
leverage that at the time. I didn't know what I know now about that.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of just sent me down a spiral of like making more accounts, you know, because
Mm.
eventually that field was becoming saturated and I was getting less
Mm-hmm.
likes, less approval. So I made more accounts to get more approval,
Okay.
right? And I just
Mm-hmm.
kept doing that over and over and over. And then that leads to the page that I have now.
Mm-hmm.
After like 4 pages, I think
Mm.
I
Mm-hmm.
deleted all the others because they were just not working. They weren't working for me. You know,
Yeah.
you're trying to get away from that person, right? That
Mm-hmm.
person that's trying to seek that approval all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, in fact, I had 180,000 follower Instagram account as well.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it was just built on that same model.
Mm-hmm.
My DMs were
Mm-hmm.
flooded. Like, I think per day, I calculated around 3 to 6,000 DMs.
Wow. Oh my
And
gosh.
that was like that for about 6 months.
I
And
get
that's,
six and I like get anxious
oh,
because I
it's
just can't respond to
right.
all
And
of
it's
them.
like, Jesus
Oh my
Christ.
gosh.
Right.
Yeah.
And the problem at the time that I was having was I knew nothing about self love. In fact, self love was a very, very new thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I got it. I started to learn about self love the moment I broke up with my, I guess you could say, first love of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the most toxic relationship I've ever been in my life.
Mm-hmm.
But I thank her. And if I ever see her again, I want to give her a hug because she allowed me, the moment I got rid of her was the moment it gave me the power to get rid of my dad. Because I didn't have the
Wow.
power to do so before. Like I felt
Oh my
scared.
god. Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it's like, and
Wow.
I noticed all the commonalities in who they were the same. And I was like, whoa,
Mm.
this needs to go away like now. And
Mm. Okay.
thankfully, life, God, universe, whatever the fuck you guys want to call it,
Mm-hmm.
took them out of my life, and it allowed for the growth that I've had now, which is into self-love, which is into my spiritual practices and into a smaller social media following, but one that is no longer seeking approval, but one that is just giving.
Mm.
That's
Wow.
it. And
Well, he dropped the mic.
boom,
Micah dropped the
that's
mic.
all. That's all.
Wow. Well, holy smokes. There is so much I want to unpack there. First of
Yeah.
all, thank you for having the courage to share a lot of that because it's never easy sharing your past and it's a hard thing to do, but I want to thank you for doing that because you're opening space for other people to acknowledge that they might have that too, and it's okay to talk about these things out loud, and it's okay to still feel pain but want to become a better person because of it. I have like a bullet list of things I just want to say right now because there's so
Go
much.
ahead.
The first, I think, um the first thing I'll say, so you mentioned at the beginning that you began your journey when you were 14 years old, and that you felt as though at 14 you had a way deeper understanding about the things that were going on around you compared to the people around you. And that is the fact that you realize that at 14 years old is mind-blowing to me, because I think very few people have that understanding and that realization when they're 14, that self-awareness, which is insane. But also, I think the fact that you started meditating at 15 years old, like, I think it's so important that we get teens involved into that now, just because the teenage years, especially now in a world that is so driven by social media and so driven by approval, as you mentioned, it is so easy to lose yourself to the outside world and neglect completely what's going on inside, right? And if we can get more teens into the habit of going inside for the fulfillment that they need versus the outside by things like meditation and journaling and whatever you want to call it, the world is going to become a better place, right? Because we're going to have more people that are seeking validation from within themselves versus in the outside world, right? So I think that's insane that you had that realization. And even now, like, I'm talking to you and you told me before we started this conversation that you were 19, and I never would have guessed that, just based off of your maturity. And I don't mean that to say that that should be everybody's goal when they're doing this. Like, the goal isn't to make yourself seem as older than you are, but just like the way that you carry yourself in the world is really cool. So that's awesome.
I'd actually like to add something to that real fast.
Oh, please do.
About meditation, because I think there's a way I've been trying to perfect a way to explain this to people, especially for kids, right? Teens, whatever. It's more of a logical approach, right? The world around us is changing. We have new iPhones coming out every year. Technology is advancing. The economy is advancing. People's civilizations are advancing. But the one thing that is not advancing is the inner work. You know, we're taught at a very young age to only focus on everything that is outside of ourselves. That is setting you up for failure in life, regardless of what you do, regardless of the amount of money that you made. Like, I set myself up at a young age to talk to probably some of the wealthiest people that I had in, like, let's say LA, right? Like, people, billionaires, millionaires. And for me, I judge things off of emotion, right? I don't care how much money you have. That doesn't matter to me. I don't give a shit how smart you are. How happy are you? If you're not happy, then you are the same as me, you know, regardless of what status or anything that you have. And meditation is marriage with oneself. It is learning to allow the flower within yourself that is still closed to blossom. And the only way that you're able to do so is by sitting down, shutting the fuck up for 30 minutes and just allow yourself to observe what is going on. Because everything around us, we are reacting to, and that is what is causing the internal chaos.
Exactly.
And the moment that you can focus and understand the internal chaos, it no longer has its gripe over you. You now can be like, you know what? I'm not going to listen to you. You can go sit in the back. I don't want to talk to you. Right? And you can go then be you, right? Live life.
Exactly.
And very thankful to have people in my life, like my friend Bajan, and some other spiritual mentors of mine that have helped me along this journey to understand that idea. Like, just very recently, I've been able to put the mind back. Just very recently. And I'm not going to lie to you, it's the most liberating feeling in the world.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's pure bliss all the time.
I think I completely agree. And I think that what you said about reacting there is so important, because I think that when you start meditating and you start listening to the inner chatter that is wanting to come out, you learn how to respond versus react to your environment, right? Like, I think that's one of, like, the biggest things that I've also gained from meditation, aside from the mental clarity, which has just been crazy, is the fact that I know how to respond to my environment based on what is true and beautiful and authentic to me. Going back to what you were talking about again earlier when I asked you that question, you mentioned that you became Michael Superhero and you became Mikah. Now, Michael still exists, right? Correct. How do you, if you do, separate Michael and Mikah, and how, I don't know the best way to ask this, but, you know, when Michael resurfaces, or what kind of relationship do you have with Michael, or like what dynamic does exist between Mikah and Michael? Because you can never separate yourself completely from Michael, right? So
Well,
where is
yes,
Michael now?
we'll get into that later. There's an idea that is, regardless if we share it on the podcast or not, I think it will intrigue you. But
Mm-hmm.
it's a parent relationship. So
Mm.
Mikah, myself, I am parenting Michael at all hours. This is why I very much don't agree with the Goggins approach, right?
Mm.
Like he's very shut the fuck up, blah 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 blah, like very negative towards your inner chatter. And for
Mm-hmm.
me, that's like I see it as my that's a little kid. Why are you cussing at a little kid? You know?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And for me, that doesn't work. That way never worked for me. I tried that for a while actually. It didn't work for me
Mm-hmm.
because the more that you do that, you're actually just suppressing that child. And the thing is that your inner child, right? And this is something that some people believe in, some people don't. It depends on your experience, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
only going to speak from my experience.
Mm-hmm.
The more I suppressed my emotions about something, and that was by, you know, focusing on other people or giving them advice or whatever the case may be, right? Not
Mm-hmm.
focusing on the little child in there that needs to be heard is simply going to cause an explosion later.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned that that's what I actually was experiencing through 15 through 17. Big.
Mm.
Because I just kept suppressing him. I just kept suppressing him, telling him to shut the fuck up. You don't matter. Right. And again,
Mm.
you have to kind of treat him as if, you know, you got to see it as this is the way I'll say it. You have to create a new mindset, a
Mm-hmm.
mindset that is separate from the child. And that's where
Mm-hmm.
the hero can exist. Right. Because,
Mm.
if like, imagine like your younger self, like the little kid comes up to you and says, I'm depressed. You're not just going to tell him to shut the fuck up.
Mm-hmm.
That's not going to happen, right? You're not.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, you got to realize that you're going to choose to love him. And,
Mm-hmm.
in all honesty, I'm probably not the best person to ask on how to do that. You kind of just got to figure that out, right?
Yeah,
Because
who really is, right?
there's
Who
no
really
one
is.
step formula for anyone when it comes to this. For me,
Absolutely.
I did a lot of research into forms of self love that weren't physical. A bubble bath didn't do shit for me, right?
Mm.
Running does something, honestly, right? Like
Uh-huh.
a bubble bath with a glass of wine, it doesn't do anything for me, right? It doesn't.
Uh-huh.
But for me, what worked was meditation and then creativity. That was another very big thing that
Mm.
helped. Creativity,
Mm-hmm.
like your child, like that is the basis of a child's mind, creativity.
Mm-hmm.
There's no
Mm-hmm.
logical thinking in there. That is just pure creativity, trying to express. And I realized that the more that someone is expressing and expressing true to themselves, the better the relationship you have with that child.
Mm.
Now, your child is still going to be hurt. There's still going to be
Mm-hmm.
problems with him, right? Him or
Mm-hmm.
her. But you have to realize that you just have to give perspective to those things when they arise.
Mm-hmm.
You notice you're so sad right now? Okay, do a quick check in, right? Where is that coming from? If you have the
Mm-hmm.
time, sit down and figure out where that's coming from. Take yourself back to that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then instead of being the child that is hurting in that situation, you have to give him the perspective and the love that is necessary in that moment that he needed. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when it starts to wipe away. Now, no longer, it won't rise anymore. It's good.
Mm-hmm.
And
Exactly.
it's consistency that helps with that. You got to consistently be doing that. That's why
Mm-hmm.
it's a full-time job. And in all honesty, for anyone who is trying to create a personal brand or anything like that, it's like you're not going to be able to do that and be like a creator. Those don't work
Mm.
because
Mm-hmm.
like people like Casey Neistat, Emma Chamberlain, some of the biggest creators in the world, they put the product, the video, above
Mm-hmm.
themselves. And what we're talking about is the polar opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Yourself matters more than anything else,
That's
right?
so
Because
important. Mm-hmm.
yourself is communicating with the world, not the video.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's where, like, for me, I decided to make that shift in content, make that shift in what I do.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, I needed I have majority of my priority is on myself. That's why I
Mm-hmm.
created the career that I did, because it allows for me to have literally at what, 2 o'clock every single day from
Mm-hmm.
2 to 4. I don't do any work. I don't think about anything else. I simply take care of myself in
Mm-hmm.
whatever way I think is needed. And in the
Mm-hmm.
morning, I take care of myself before I start any kind of work, start any kind of social hour or anything, or even check my phone.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things matter.
Mm-hmm.
It's about starting your day properly. And if you need that middle ground to, take care of yourself, do it, and then do it again at night.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a disciplined person. That's the one thing I learned as a
Mm-hmm.
child. That was like my superpower. Because when I was a kid, I controlled nothing in my entire life. Nothing. I had no say in anything. But what I did know is I could be disciplined at whatever I did. And that
Mm-hmm.
made me like a little Nazi, to be honest. It was kind of bad. It wasn't great, but it taught me the necessities needed for me to get where I am. The
Mm-hmm.
reason I've gotten where I am is not because I ascended or some bullshit. No,
Mm-hmm.
it is discipline of those practices that then
Mm-hmm.
allowed for the ascension, that then allowed for the understanding, that then
Mm-hmm.
allowed for the love.
Yeah.
The discipline of those tasks gave me what I have today. And I'm thankful
Mm-hmm.
for that.
That's amazing. I love that you phrase it that way, because I feel like sometimes the self-love journey is so glorified. Like you said, right? A lot of people paint it to be the bubble baths with the wine. And as much as those help, I won't lie. Like if you offered me a bubble bath and a glass of wine, I probably wouldn't turn it down.
Hey, right,
But
right.
right. But I also don't define it like, what am I gain unless I'm sitting there meditating with that glass of wine. I don't feel like I'm gaining anything or that I'm giving back to myself in any way, shape, or form, right? And I think that it's so important to start painting the self-development journey as something that is going to be inherently painful, right? Because like you said, you are so I really agree with your approach. I am a big fan of David Goggins, if I'm gonna admit that openly on here, and people who follow me on Instagram will know that I've reposted his content. Um, Only for the sake of the fact that I like his approach to toughness, I guess, in the sense that I like his philosophy about most of the time you're only functioning at 40%, when in reality you could be functioning at way higher. It's just your mind is holding you back because your mind doesn't want to get uncomfortable, right? What I do agree with you though is on the fact that you cannot suppress until you explode, right? Because I've also been through that process where I have invalidated myself to the point where I've just found myself in some of the most lost states I've ever found myself in my life. And so often the chatter that is within us when we actually quiet down to listen, and a lot of the bad behaviors that we elicit exteriorly are a result of the needs that weren't met when we were children, right? When we're children, we don't know how to communicate our needs to the people around us because we think that our parents are right. So like, for example, the example that I always like to give is my parents, for example. And I know a lot of people's parents did this, and I'm not trying to single my parents out here, but my parent, or my dad at least, believed that the best way to make his daughters tough was by telling them they were too sensitive when we cried.
Oh, I can relate
Right.
to that on such a
Right.
high level.
Right. So it was like, you're being too dramatic, you're being too sensitive. And the intention behind that was right, was in some ways okay, right? Like in his mind, he's trying to make his daughters tough. But I am, for whatever reason, a very emotional person that needs to, my way of releasing stress and expressing emotion sometimes is through crying, right? And when you feel like you can't do that because you're weak, and you as a child, you don't know how other way to express that, it affects you later in life, right? Like you feel weak crying in front of other people, you feel weak crying even to yourself, right? So when I also started my journey of meditation and started realizing, where the shame was coming from and what I had to do to eliminate, it was understanding that, being sensitive is okay, and it doesn't even, we don't have to label it as sensitive. It's just simply you feeling the emotion that is coming from within you, right? So I like that you have approached it, and you do this on Instagram all the time. Like you encourage people to go towards your pain, because that's where you're going to find yourself, and that's where you're going to find your healing. So I love that you've defined it like that.
Absolutely. I'm probably going to challenge a lot of what you just said, especially about Goggins' idea. Because
Mm,
um,
I'm up for a challenge.
there's one thing about being tough, but being tough doesn't allow you to use 100% of your brain.
mm,
What allows for you to use
okay.
100% of your brain is when you're in a state of happiness and joy. Your brain performs the best scientifically that way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a guy that I follow. He's a mystic, and I've met this man in real life. And gosh, I don't know how to describe him to people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to be dramatic, but he's a holy man. The man is a holy man.
Okay.
Like he's a beaming light. He's not fucking with you. There's no lights or anything. He's literally just his energy. Man's
Mm-hmm.
always smiling, always
Mm-hmm.
happy. And what he basically was teaching us was your mind does not work best when it is being closed into a corner.
Mm-hmm.
You know, pressure makes diamond, sure. But that also just, you're skewed in your thinking that way. When you are from a state of happiness and joy, your thinking actually does the opposite of skew. It expands.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, the happier you are, the more inclusive you can be with things in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, for example, this conversation, I am 100% inclusive with this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Besides the little dog coming in the room doing that, I allowed for that to have my attention. But in
You
all
guys weren't
honesty,
here when this happened, but Micah's
right,
dog came
right,
in and
right.
took a poop on his carpet.
Yeah, man. Wow. Okay. But when you're in that state of happiness, you're able to be a part of everything. And it's like my
Mm-hmm.
friend always told me, he's like, when you see everything as a part of yourself, you can feel nothing else but compassion and love.
I love
And
that.
that helps with going to the gym. That helps with anything in your life because, you know, I think we put this. It's a natural approach for the brain, right? To, you know, if they're suffering, tough it up, right? That's the natural instinct to that, right? It's the survival instinct. But you're still
Mm-hmm.
thinking upon the boundaries of your mind and the boundaries of your physical instincts. What we're
Mm.
talking about is something that is the sixth sense, right? Something that is of your soul, of your energy that connects you to everything. It's outside of your body.
Mm.
And I know that's
Mm-hmm.
something that's a very difficult thing for anyone to understand that has not had an experience like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's why Sadhguru, a lot of the stuff that he says, it's like, it's impactful, but I still don't know what he's talking about, you
Oh,
know,
I
like,
totally feel that. I
right? And
totally
it's
feel
like,
that.
I
I
don't know what
try
you're
to absorb it
talking
so
about,
hard, but
dude.
it's just like,
It doesn't work.
what?
Right. It's
It's
like,
hard.
dude, right. And he's one of those people that's like,
Mm-hmm.
there's probably a few people like that, that they could talk about water and it could feel like the most important conversation you've ever heard in your life, you know?
Uh-huh. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's
Oh,
crazy.
yeah. And in all honesty, because I went so far into that idea, I completely forgot my second point.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Mike and I have been forgetting points back and forth because we just get so engrossed into this
That's
conversation.
that's really though. That's kind of how it should be, you know, like for me,
Exactly. It just means it's
interviews,
flowing.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It's conversation. It's not an interview, it's just conversation.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, if it comes back to you, feel free to throw it into the middle of the episode, regardless of what we're talking about.
All right, all right.
I do want to talk social media with you, but before we get onto that, you shared a little bit about your story with your father with us, and you have also shared a little bit about your story about your father on your Instagram. And from the way you've been discussing it, it sounds like you've done a lot of healing from it. Um,
Yeah.
which is I'm so happy for you for because it's a very difficult environment to grow up in. But and I admire that you have taken it as a driving force in your life to become better and to heal from it. So where do you think you are now on that healing journey?
You know, I if you met me, if we had this conversation even a week before today,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have been able to answer that question. But I went to my brother's birthday party last weekend
Mm-hmm.
and I saw my dad. And we had an hour and a half conversation, just me and him. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, before, most of the conversations are usually very, it's not a conversation. It's him essentially reinstating his egotistical illusion. That's all that it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like
Mm-hmm.
he usually asks me this classic question of, you know, am I a good dad? Well, here's the thing, you don't want my answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I remember when I first tried, I really poked at it, like really, and I probably popped the balloon actually.
Mm-hmm.
But what he did is he spent the entire time not seeing the balloon, not seeing what's inside that balloon. He just decided to restructure that thing with some duct tape, literally. And he would essentially break down my ideas through breaking down me to
Mm-hmm.
reinstate that he's a good dad and his illusion, right? And that's everyone, right? Everyone has their illusions. I still have my illusions. I am 19 years old. I am not fucking perfect. I
Mm-hmm.
still have plenty of illusions about a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
But usually those conversations used to bring me at such a, I had become so anxious and incredibly like on the verge of a panic attack, you know, very
Mm-hmm.
unstable, right? But
Mm-hmm.
when I was sitting there with him, I nothing was affecting me. nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that he said, his aura, his energy, nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in a way that he saw that, and it definitely bothered him. It
Mm.
definitely bothered him because he kind of realized in a way he literally has no or little to no power over me now
Mm.
because
Mm-hmm.
I've removed the emotional bondage from a lot of stuff
Mm-hmm.
that he had over me. So to answer your question, I think I'm in a very good place. I think
Mm-hmm. Well,
I'm at this moment where I've probably healed through, I can't say an amount, but I'm able to be around him without him having a personal effect on me anymore. Now, that does not
that's
mean I want
huge.
to stay around him, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
he asked my mom if I could unblock him. And at this current moment, as much as it goes against my belief system of surrender to life, right? That's like how I live my life.
Mm-hmm.
At this moment, I don't think he deserves to still be in my life. And there's no
Mm-hmm.
value either way for him to still be contacting me.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think at this moment I'm going to surrender to that just yet. I don't think I'm ready
Mm-hmm.
for that. But it helped me to understand that the conversation that I have with him that, you know, I'm good. And
Mm-hmm.
I chose the path that was right for me. I didn't go to college like he wanted me to. And he
Mm-hmm.
actually said that to me. Fun
Mm-hmm.
fact, regardless if you put this in there or not, he literally said to me, he was like, "You're the kid that didn't need college." And I was like, "Yeah, I know. Why do you think I didn't go?"
Wow.
And that was it. I hope that answered the question. I was really happy
Mm-hmm.
about that. Yeah.
It did. It did. And again, a million thank yous for having the courage to share that with us because this is not easy. It's not an easy thing to do, but I admire that you're opening space for other people to do the same and to feel that and to understand, to hopefully feel that they're not alone if they've had a difficult relationship with a parent growing up. But to speak to your point about you not feeling like your dad deserves to come into your life in that way right now, I think that one of the biggest things that we can do for ourselves when we are going through processes of healing, whether it's a relationship with a parent or with a friend or whatever it may be for you, you're allowed to put in boundaries until you feel like you're ready to tear them down, and there is nothing wrong with staying away from a person or group of people or pushing them away for a little bit, or even if it's permanently, right? But even if you feel like right now you're not ready for that and you need to go work on yourself before you can address that, we need to remove the guilt from that. And I think that you speaking openly about that, especially as first about somebody like your father who is you're one of your direct family members, that's huge. And I really admire that you've spoken about that shamelessly, even if inside you talking about it you feel some kind of guilt. I don't know if that's the case, but
I have
it's
no connection to those thoughts that he
okay.
sits in the back seat right now.
Okay, well, there you go. Like it's removing that guilt that we should normalize. So that's huge. That's huge. Thank you for sharing that.
I think
So
that's a big
mhm,
thing for a lot of
mhm,
people. Like guilt, guilt is the mind. It's just from the mind. That's all it
mhm,
is. It's a preference to not change your ways, right?
mhm,
Regardless of what it's doing to you. And the reason I was able to say that calmly, um, without waver in voice,
mhm,
tone, or how I feel innerly is because of the self-respect that I've built with myself.
mhm,
The reason that I'm okay saying those words is because I put in the work to get where I am. I put in the work, the tears, the horrible, horrible suicidal moments and like the horrible stuff, right? Like
mhm,
I've put in the work to be able to say those words confidently. And that's not to say you haven't, but I'm just saying that if you have that guilt right now, it just means you got to keep putting in the work. That's it. It's got to
mhm.
keep loving yourself,
Exactly.
keep learning about yourself, and that will become easier to do. Stepping away from things that aren't good for you will be much easier through
Mhm,
as you do that more and more. It'll just become a lot easier. Now, there's
mhm,
difference though. A God complex, in my opinion, it's necessary to
mm.
begin.
That's
You need a
interesting
God
perspective.
complex at the beginning. I
Mhm,
started with a God complex because you know it's for me it's like it's very difficult to kind of slowly ease yourself to like self-respect because that's a there's no formula for that. There's no real way to do that. You kind of have to really figure that out. so
mhm,
so like for me I kind of suggest people just overboard it, go all the way God complex.
mhm,
Now you'll likely keep the group of friends around you that will keep you sane and check that shit. But keep the God complex, then eventually will go down as you learn how to ease out that balance. But the God complex is necessary because it's going to help you get rid of anything in your life that's removing your peace, period. And that's a big step, right? Like people don't even realize the friends in their life that are literally draining for them all the time. People don't even realize the job that they have that's draining them, the school that they're going to that's draining them, and the family that's draining them, which is also another freaking problem. You know, just because your family doesn't like that doesn't mean anything. You know, like you're my mom, okay, but you're also the only thing in my life that's causing me major unhappiness and major discomfort within myself. So you're gonna have to go for that reason. You know, and that's where I think a mindset shift, that could be a basis for a mindset shift. It's understanding that you as a person, you have absolutely no obligation to keep anyone in your life. You have no obligation to do any of the things that society ever tells you to do, ever. This is your life. You can make whatever decisions you want to with that, good or bad.
Exactly.
And that people just need to believe that and go with that model. Most people don't, though. It's very difficult. Very difficult.
It is really difficult to get over the guilt of that. I could sit here and talk about that all day, and we will be addressing some of those conversations in the Q&A section. Like I said, I could talk about this all day. I'm so fascinated, but I do want to talk to you about social media because that was something that people expressed a lot that they wanted to talk about, and something I really want to know because, like I mentioned at the beginning, you have a very, it seems outwardly, you're not afraid of showcasing yourself on social media the way you do, and that may or may not be true, but there's a lot I wanted to break down there. So I'm going to start this section off with a personal story just that goes along with something that you said at the beginning, which is that you found yourself deleting a lot of your past accounts because you found that they had maybe ill intentions, if that's the way of putting it, or not pure intentions tied to them, and not what you wanted to be accomplishing them with them. So for myself, I relate to that a lot because you were talking about how at 14 you felt like you had a self-awareness beyond the people around you at your age, at least. And I relate to that a lot as well, because I feel that for most of my life, I feel like I'm more of a listener than I'm a talker. And people on here will be like, "Are you kidding? You're like talking right now. You're hogging the microphone." But in real life, I like to think that I am the listener. Maybe now I'm more of the talker because I've gained more confidence. But growing up, I was the listener. Like I just observed and listened. And I feel like after a lot of years, I accumulated like all of these life lessons and all of these ideas in my head. And now that I am 21 and old and more confident to talk about them openly, and now that I have a circle of people who have similar interests and that I do, those ideas are just spitting out. Like that was kind of the main reason why I wanted to start this podcast, was to share these insights with these people and to share the insight of people like you on here as well. So I have an Instagram account, which is like a very basic Instagram account. Like you post pictures of your friends on there and whatever. And the Instagram account that I use now, which some of you will know as at Mary's Perspective on Instagram, I began that Instagram only about 6 months ago, but I'm going to confess this openly on here. I've never confessed this on a social platform, but I confess I began that account without telling anybody. And to this day, very few people in my life actually know of it and of my podcast, because I'm very afraid that people are going to think that I'm living like this dual life, because I feel that the person that I represent myself as on my main account, I guess you could call, or my other account, my basic Instagram account, is not the woman that talks. Like I've posted book quotes on there. I've posted stuff about allyship on there like very frequently, but not to the level of authenticity that I think I represent at Mary's Perspective. And right now I feel like I'm living this dichotomy, or like this double life, right? And part of me wants to show that to the world and to the people around me, but I'm also afraid that people are going to think that I'm doing it for attention, or like this side of Instagram, Mary's Perspective in the podcast, for attention, or I don't know. It sounds weird saying it out loud, right? But there's just like that. I guess it's the fear of judgment that we all get. And so even now I feel like I only got comfortable with reels and TikTok, mostly because I double check my facial expressions and my hand movements like 20 times when I go post it, right? But I feel like I'm living this dual life, and I don't like that, and I want to be the same person that I am behind the screen and in front of the screen to everybody. So I want to know, after your experience with the validation thing, how you've kind of coped with that and aligned, I guess, all the Mikahs that you have kind of explored with, and what your experience has been with expressing yourself online to get to where you are now.
Gotcha. That's a good question. That's a really good question. No one's ever asked me that one. That's a good question.
Thank you.
I'd probably say you have to decide what you want to share. Like for me, I decided upon 3 things. I'm going to share my joy, my struggles, and my lessons to whatever degree I feel comfortable. I am this person regardless. I am. But it's more so, I think it's 2 things. For me, I learned that you have no obligation to share everything. And in fact, if you do, you'll actually lose more of yourself doing that, because you're no longer doing things for yourself, right? There's no you. There's just the you on the internet. And that then just becomes that same model that you value the internet over you do yourself. For example, like I tell people about yoga, but I'm not showing them my yoga. I tell people about meditation, but I'm not showing you meditation, right? And that's because I didn't want to allow for my ego to get the stand as a teacher. I'm not a teacher. I'm not there yet. Life hasn't given me that opportunity yet, right? That's not my next steps. My steps
How
are
have you
not.
decided that you're not a teacher?
No, I did. Like when I was doing all this advice and stuff, I was putting myself as the persona as a teacher.
Oh,
And because
so
I
you do
did that,
embody yourself as a teacher, or you do see yourself as a teacher?
I did. Not
You
anymore. I
did, not
did.
anymore.
Yeah. And
Okay.
that's helped, and it's definitely cut my following. But at the same time, it's allowed for me to be able to have better relationships in my life, right? Like I have like a friend of mine, we call like 3 to 4 times a week. We talk, we have conversation, but she's always as interested in my yoga. So I just show her my yoga. She does the yoga with me right before we go to bed. Literally.
Oh, nice. Okay.
That's literally what it is. It's super chill. But at the same time, it's kind of like I'm not sharing people like what I eat every meal of the day. I'm not sharing people what I'm wearing for outfits. Like at the end of the day, I don't care enough about those things to make a video about them. I literally will wear the same thing every day. Like, and I think that's where that's helped me. It's understanding what you want to share, because then you have parameters, right? Like occasionally I'll share a breakfast meal, and every day I'll show my running, but I'm not showing you my run, right? Like those vlogs that I made, I stopped doing that because that was changing that model, changing the model back to what I just told you. It's okay to not tell your friends. I didn't tell my friends. The only way that they found out is that all of their friends were sending my videos that they found on viral accounts to them. And they were like, that's your friend. I know him. And they're like, yeah, I do too. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like who you are online and who you are with your friends will never really be the same person.
You don't think so?
No, because as long as you're, at least in my eyes, because your friends know you one way, right? They know so much more about you than the people on the internet do. So you're never actually naturally going to act the same way around them. You technically won't, right? You're going to act and react to how they are, right? And you'll react to that camaraderie. So it's fine that you don't tell your friends about that, at least in my opinion. It's like, it's okay. Like, I don't follow my friends on my account. It's because it's not necessary. They know I'm still their friend. Like, it's good. It's all right. Everything's okay. And for me, I'd say more so, yeah, that's honestly it. As long as you know what you want to share, everything else is fine. Because then you can live your life and still be fine. But you know that, oh, that's right. I want to share this. I want to talk about this, right? To whatever degree that you want to do that, you have to just decide upon that. We'll talk about more about that later. But yeah, I like that. I hope that answers the question. I'm really
No,
bad at answering questions sometimes.
no. I appreciate that, and I think that's a really good way of looking at it. And I feel like I don't get as much of the guilt of like not following my friends and like knowing what's up because I see them at school. I hear about them, right? It's more of the fear of not, I feel of not being the same person to them, right? But I like your approach of like you're never gonna be 100% because I guess you are performing for a different audience when you are online, right? So it's a fine line to, especially when you're doing it for like marketing purposes. I wouldn't say like my page is a marketing page particularly, but
Right.
yeah, like you said, to touch on your point about you not seeing yourself as a teacher now, correct? Now you don't see yourself as a teacher. I'm going to quote my roommate here because I really like her life philosophy. She calls herself a work in progress to everybody, which I adore. But I think you can still be a teacher and be a work in progress, because I think that, as much as I can't follow your formula for how you're living your life and vice versa to the T, I can still pull. I mean, I've pulled so much inspiration just out of this conversation alone, but even when I think it's the idea of you don't have to be at your best to show people how it's done. Like
Right.
if you can show people the ebbs and the lows and the good and the bad, you're still contributing something. And I think that's something that I have come to value a lot in social media accounts because I feel like most of the time we are only seeing the good, right? And I've mentioned this on here so many times that paints such a toxic picture about how life is supposed to be. And I feel like that is now why people find themselves in such dark places when they fall into that loophole of stuff going bad periodically for some time, because it happens, right? Like that's just life. But because we are seeing only the good online, we feel like it should always be that way. And so when it's not, we're like, okay, well, clearly the problem is with us because it's not going 100% okay. So I like your approach to that. And I'm going to challenge you to see yourself more as a teacher because you're being a very good teacher to me. And I
Well,
speak for myself on that.
okay. So I actually didn't even think about that point. That's a good one. You helped me get into that. You got to document.
Mm-hmm.
Documenting is everything. Like,
I like that.
regardless on how you're building a personal brand, document that process. If you're an artist, document how you make your shit, right? To whatever degree you want to do that. I'm not really a creator. Like, that's not me, like, to my soul. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm someone who's more so like a marketer. I'm good at that stuff. I really like that stuff. But that comes with self-awareness, right? Lots and lots and lots of it, right? And I just
Mm-hmm.
actually recently figured that out, like maybe 3 weeks ago or something. Again,
Mm-hmm.
very fresh, very new.
Mm-hmm. It's
It's,
exciting.
yeah, you got to document. Like for me, like when I'm like really struggling, again, that's where the amount that I want to share of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because is a very fine line, right? Like let's say you're struggling for a week. You don't need to make a week's worth of content about how you're struggling because one,
Mm-hmm.
you did nothing to get yourself out of that. You simply just made
Mm-hmm.
content about how you were struggling. It doesn't do anything for you.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, it gets you an audience, but now you just gained 1,000 followers of people that are struggling and aren't getting better. And they likely
Mm-hmm.
don't want to get better. They just want to
Mm-hmm.
bitch about it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, one of my I mentor a few people because I just like to, right? That's like my way
Mm-hmm.
of teaching. I'll accept like a few of those.
Mm-hmm.
One of them, their names is Patricia. Love her soul.
Nice.
I've been talking to her for about 6 months.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully
Um,
she's listening.
right. But she was kind of telling me one time, I think it was about 2 weeks ago. She was like, I really like how open you are, but at the same time, I can tell that you deal a lot of, you deal with a lot of it on your own, and then you come to the conclusion and help. And
Mm.
that's how I
Mm-hmm.
do it because again, all I was doing and how I grew accounts before was through struggle. But again, I only focused on expressing struggle and it didn't ever turn
Without
into a
the
lesson
solution.
or a solution, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, in a way, I see myself as a teacher through my experiences and what I share
Mm-hmm.
of them, right? The ideas and things that I learn. But at the same time, when I saw myself as a teacher, there was like this this change in the reason why I made content.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I don't believe
I
you should
like
be
that.
making content for anyone but yourself.
Mm.
You'll last longer that way. Because if you're making something for
Mm.
somebody else, and they don't see it or they don't like
Yeah.
it, now you're fucked, right? Now
Yeah.
you feel some kind of way about it. Now you pissed off at them for not watching your podcast or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But if you're doing it for yourself and you're documenting this journey for yourself, like I make those videos because they help reinstate the ideas when I need them, right? Or when I have a flow of energy come through me, I'll just say something. And that doesn't happen all the time. I'm not someone who's very consistent like that. I go through days. I consider myself like a lion. Like a lion's awake 4 hours of the day. The rest of he's asleep. I'm not sleeping, but I'm doing other shit, right? Like I'm not creating or expressing. I'm simply just being and living and experiencing. And that's what I spend a majority of my time doing, right? I think there's privilege in being able to understand that you can share these aspects of your life, but sharing them to the extent that they don't become you and they don't prevent you from progressing. That's it. That's the biggest key.
I like that. I like that. So as you shifted into creating for yourself, it's difficult. So I love that approach, and I do agree that when you start creating from a lens of I'm doing this for myself, to look back on this later and to be able to watch these videos later when I'm in a bad place and remind myself, at one point you were good. Here's what you learned, right? But when you start creating for yourself and then people lash back at you, criticism, disagreement, whatever that looks like on social media can be a really toxic place. Okay. So how have you come to deal with the negativity that people throw at you? Because I think that when you start creating for yourself and when you go in, like, especially as a newbie like myself, who is just learning how to work TikTok and Instagram Reels and be that authentic person that I know myself to be, when people comment back things that aren't the nicest and you're doing it from a place of creating for yourself, then you start to question yourself even more, I feel like. So that's in just my opinion. I think like it's very easy to start doubting yourself when people are questioning your personal method versus if you made a video that was either a copy of somebody else's or like pulled a lot of inspiration from somebody else's, right? When it's original work, it's difficult to get to have that negative feedback. So how have you kind of learned to deal with that judgment online?
You separate yourself from what you're creating. I made it. Like, for example, today's videos, I knew damn well they were going to do bad because it's a unique idea. It's something that I've not seen anywhere except for in this little book that I just read. Literally, the only place I've ever seen that idea. And it's basically he asked me a question. He was like, if God were to sit you down today, right? I'm sure you saw the video. If God were to sit you down today,
brilliant video,
and asked you he told you that everything that he is putting into your life is for your benefit, regardless if that is taking people out of your life or doing something that you don't like, he's doing it for your benefit. Would you believe him? And, for most people, they took that in the direction of the very skewed, honestly, very ignorant mindset of how religion is today. They think all those things, but then they're still suffering. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. If you know and you believe that everything in your life is for your benefit, you have no reason to suffer. None. Because that means your reaction to everything in your life is positive. So when a video doesn't do well, I don't have a connection to the video. I just put it up. Before I did. And the only reason that bothered me was because I was still seeking the approval. The balance system was wrong. When you're creating something for yourself, in a way, like when I was making those vlogs and they didn't do well, that was creating for myself. But at the same time, there was still the mindset of seeking approval, which is unnecessary. You're giving. That's all you're doing.
Yeah.
You're giving to yourself and you're giving to whoever is watching. And if someone has something to say about that, no, more like people will always have something to say.
People will always have something
People
to say.
will always have something to say. So what the fuck does it matter? Like, there was a time where certain ideas, especially, I'm sure I'll read the comments in a couple hours about videos that I put up today. There was quite a bit of argument in there about people feeling some kind of way about what I had to say. At the end of the day, it's your opinion. You're entitled to your opinion, but I don't have to listen to it. And there's a way that I explain this. I'm gonna use my brother's Fortnite card for this. Okay.
Very nice.
Imagine this is a letter, right? And we're gonna use this letter as, let's say, negativity, but let's specify it being content or the comments. right? Someone's saying something negative to you, right? You put out a piece of content. They drop a comment. It's negative. It makes you feel bad, right? The only reason it made you feel bad is because you decided to pick up the letter, read it, and then reply. You didn't have to accept the letter in the first place.
No.
You never had to. And my mentor always taught me that. He was like, you always have the option to not respond. And it becomes easier when you separate yourself from it. Now, again, that goes back to meditation and learning how to create the separation between you and your ego and all those other things. Like just very recently, I've started to be okay with like not seeking approval. There's better ways to do it by like getting off of social media in general for a couple months, maybe a month or so, and creating things but never posting them, right? Doing it that way. But at the same time, it's mainly just what you put out is only an extension of you. It is not you. So when someone is attacking, it's like attacking your finger. It's okay, right? The finger is fine. Everything's all right. Maybe a little bit bruised, but it's okay, right? You're all good. Nothing's wrong. And the sooner you're able to accept that, the easier it is. So when someone there was a time where when you say something that is not a popular opinion, this is why you need to start with your own beliefs. Start by sharing what you believe in your opinions, not other people's opinions. Because if you build an audience of people that off of popular beliefs, again, that's what all those pages technically were, even though they were partly mine. But after a while, I wasn't really that sad anymore. But again, mindset wise, I had to keep it up, right? So I would go and find other people to help bring me back to that place, use their content, read back in my own way. Just a bunch of bullshit, basically, right? And I think you need to be able to start out by just sharing what you think, regardless if anyone else agrees with that shit.
Absolutely.
Shares it or anything. Because at the end of the day, you won't build an audience of people that already believe something popular. You essentially will be building an audience of people who agree with what you believe.
They may or may not, right?
Right.
At least I think more value to that is people who are willing to take it and think about it, right? Because I think very few people are willing to do that in this day and age. Like we are so glued to, we think we are our beliefs, right? This idea that we are exactly what we believe in, which is not the case. And I love that you say that, because I don't think, I mean, as a recently new podcast host, I don't think you realize how much courage it takes to share your opinion and your belief on a public platform where anybody and everybody can hear it, and anybody and everybody can tear you down for it. And that's why I feel like I do this again to emphasize the fact that, like, I say this a lot in my episodes, like when I'm sharing a personal opinion or in my captions, like, this is just my opinion and I'm opening the floor to discussion for it, right? But a part of me is always like, you should not feel the need to do that, right? Because it should just be your opinion and people shouldn't feel the need to tear it down necessarily. Like you can challenge, I think you and I just had you challenged my opinion very healthily. I don't even know if that's a word, but you challenged my opinion in a very healthy way about David Goggins. And I think that is healthy conversation, and that is where you create new ideas and new learning. But it's from tearing people's opinions down that we are creating this toxic culture, which is now like the cancel culture that is so alive in social media right now, where people are afraid to make mistakes now. And how are we learning? How are we getting better from that? Right. So,
well, I have for a take on that. I think it's simple, because the mind, right? I always call it the mind because I'm not the mind, right? It's a belief system I have. Right or wrong doesn't exist. It's something that we decided upon as a society. It's something that you decided upon in your world, right? And when someone doesn't agree with what you have to say, it's like, okay, well, that's not right in your world, but it's right in mine. So that's all that matters, right? When you stop living by a belief system of right or wrong, everything becomes a lot easier. That's when things become a whole lot easier. For example, like there's a reason why I'm not a very popular person on the internet anymore. There's a reason for that. It's because I'm no longer speaking about things from a popular mindset. I'm not, right? And because of that, that's going to limit the audience I have. And that's okay, right? At the end of the day, it's not about the amount of people that follow you. It's about the impact you have on the people that do follow you, right? And
well said.
I think it's just that it's the game of right or wrong, right? Most people will take the route of making content that is of popular opinion because they will sacrifice their opinion to gain approval of what's considered the right opinion. Social media is not freedom of speech. It's actually the polar opposite of freedom of speech. It's popular. Popular opinions go good. If you don't agree, like that, there's a reason why on TikTok, like regardless if you're Republican or Democrat or whatever the fuck, like I'm sorry, that just doesn't matter. But if you're a Democrat, you will be absolutely loved, taken in, supported, held tightly by the TikTok or any social media platform in general, really. But if you're a Republican, then you were deemed and banned and attacked, right? All because of a belief system of right or wrong. And in all honesty, most people, and this is where I'll challenge your beliefs in another healthy way with when you say beliefs are who you are. Beliefs are things that can be changed. Experiences are what make up who you are. Right? Like for example, like for most people, I don't really believe they believe in God, or I don't really think people really believe in Catholicism or any of that, because you have no personal experience with it. You can't have a strong belief of something you've never had an experience with. It's impossible, because there's nothing for your brain to pull upon. There's nothing for your brain to hold tangible to either. So for me, that's why I like this entire conversation. Everything that I've said is only from my experience, and I then therefore only share that on the internet as well. It's your experience that you're speaking from. If you're trying to speak from another voice, you will always feel fake. You will always give a shit what other people think about it. But if you're speaking from literally your own belief system and what you've experienced in your life, there won't be any problem.
Exactly. I love that outlook. Oh my gosh, I could talk about this all day. But this will not be the first and only time you guys hear Mikah on this podcast. Unfortunately, we are in a bit of a time crunch, but you have dropped some very big knowledge bombs on here, and I absolutely love it. With regretfully so, we do have to move on to the Q&A because we do have some eager questions from the people on here. But what I want to know, if anybody has any thoughts on anything that was just said about beliefs, experiences, anything that we just mentioned, please shoot it in the comments on here on Instagram, because we want to hear it. Again, they're your opinions and we're going to respect them because that's all they are. So
exactly.
So the first, I won't be calling out the followers' names, but the first question that was asked by one of the followers is, what should you do if you're stuck in a toxic household? And you can answer this, and I will try to give my we can both give our perspectives on this question.
Did they happen to tell their age?
They did not.
Okay, no. That's all right. I think this goes back to a little bit of what I was saying earlier. You know, in truth, you know, my real healing didn't really start till I got out, to be honest. You can't really heal in an environment you got sick in. It's not possible. Right? But what you can do, let's say you have your own room, right? And this is a big hypothetical. I had my own room, and I'm not gonna lie, I took that room very seriously, because that room represented the aura of me. And I bought candles, aura cleansers, and rocks, and I put them in every aspect of the room to help keep that energy only within this room and not allow anything to intrude into it. I had rules about who can enter the room. I had rules about knocking. You gotta just a bunch of shit, right? Not saying you have to do all of that, but I'm saying that you need to be able to treat your space as if it's everything to you, because it is, right? If you have an argument with your parents in that room, okay, well now your room is just full of negative energy. Do your best to have that conversation outside. Do your best to have that conversation in a place that you don't have to then go back to, right? Consistently. I think that's big, you know, because I won't get into karma, because that's like a whole other topic, and I'm sure like that
we'll talk about it the next time you're on here.
Yeah,
don't worry,
because that's a whole other thing. And it's not something I know much about it from my experience. It's easier to explain it that way, but you would have had to have a certain base knowledge to understand what I'd say about that. But what I'd say is, spend as much time as you can, either outside of the house, especially if it's abusive, don't come home until like it's absolutely necessary. But also I'd probably say focus on healing that inner turmoil in any way that you can. And that's not going to be through any physical exterior item. You will not be able to heal that way. You won't. Art will probably be the closest thing, right? Like art is a great way to express, but art is actually probably one of the only ways you are capable of bringing what's inner outer. It's one of the only truest ways of healing to a physical exterior world. Drugs, alcohol, running, exercise, none of those things will actually fix the problem, right? I think for them, they need to have a certain understanding that what their parents say to them is not simply even spoken to them. They're telling you that you're worthless and all that. They're not talking to you. They're not. You got to realize that they're hurting you because they've been hurt. Simple as that. And the moment that you see them that way, you can actually choose compassion, right? If that's a very deep stage. Like to give in all honesty, despite being healed from my father, I don't forgive him. I'm not there, right? And that's okay. That should not be anyone's first step. In fact, that's like the last step. The first step is just to have that perspective and knowing that what they're saying is they're not talking to me. It's not applying to me. And start to devaluize the opinions of your family or anyone that is making you feel that way. Instead, what I like to call it is like, it's kind of like how you build confidence. It's the same way, right? The only reason that, you believe what someone else says about you is because you haven't made a belief about that area. Right? Logically, like you haven't, right? Like most people grow up literally not ever figuring that out, ever. Like that you get to decide who you are. You get to decide what you believe about yourself. And those beliefs are like your suit of armor. And so like when someone calls you fat, well, you're not, right? So it becomes laughable. It's stupid, right? And it's not you because you've created like a chest plate for that, right? Or whatever. That's kind of how I think about that. The way that you can kind of go about doing that is I'd say do yoga. That's pretty good about grounding yourself. And then just start to write down things about yourself that you truly want to believe about you. And do that as often as possible and do not waver from that. Do not. That will be probably the best way that I could say under a time constraint. That would probably be my best advice to that.
Well, that was brilliant advice. if I can speak to it myself. I love what you said, and if I'm speaking from my experience is very different than Mikah's. I did grow up with both my parents, but I did watch my parents separate emotionally from each other for many years, and in a lot of ways it hurts you as a child, right? Because you watch the two people that you thought would stay together, that you're looking up to for the example of love, separate, and it touches you in a certain way. So I think that in my experience of toxicity, which again is very different from your own, I think the biggest thing I can tell you guys is that, to tie to Micah's point, is that when you understand that people act out of their nurture 95% of the time, you will forgive them much more easily, because you will start to realize that although it does not completely justify their actions or their words, it makes it easier on you, because we are so unaware so often of the things that we are doing out of a place of where we've been tamed to do certain things, and out of the beliefs that have been instilled in us from a young age. And when we can understand that, and understand that people usually act out of those beliefs, to me at least, that was a huge step in my healing journey. And very similar to you, Micah, I was able to look at my parents for and many other people, not just my parents, in my life, for a separate from the things that they were relaying to me through their actions and through their words. So I think that's a huge first step. And I think another thing too is very similar to something that you were saying earlier in the podcast, is recognizing that you are allowed to put up boundaries that serve you, and you should be unapologetic about it. Because if yes, it hurts because it's your family, and because your mother birthed you, and your father and your mother may have raised you your entire life, but you choose family. it doesn't matter if it's blood. You get to choose your family and what you do with that family. And so if you feel like you need to put boundaries in a place that help you get to where you want to, you don't owe anybody an explanation for it. So that's what I have to say to that. I don't know if you want
That's
to add
great.
anything.
I want to add
Oh,
something to
thank
that
you.
really fast.
Mm-hmm.
Boundaries may, depending on the parent. That's actually probably when I instilled that boundary. It's actually the same day I got kicked out.
Mm.
So I'd say you need to make sure that you have one other person that you can go to, because toxic people hate boundaries. They hate it.
Mm-hmm.
They do, because it means they can't do anything they want with you anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you just got to make sure that you have some other place to go to. And if it gets violent, then that there needs to be some form of way for that to stop. I don't condone that at all. And when I say abuse for myself, I received mental and emotional abuse most of my life. Physical was for the first parts, and that went away.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like a big thing though. Boundaries is something they won't like. So make sure that you have a second place to stay. That's all. That's all. But you did great. You did great. That
Yeah.
was a great
Oh,
answer to that.
thank you. Thank you. Well, again, it goes back to like you choose your family, right? Or at least the people
Absolutely.
that you love in your life. So
Right.
very nice. The second question is this is question 2 out of 3 is what brings you joy or what motivates you?
Oh man.
There were many more questions, but I had to pick the top 3.
Understood. Understood.
Mm-hmm.
What brings you joy and brings me the most joy? When I can be as inclusive I can with any experience of my life, that brings me the most joy. If I can recall in a few moments in my life, I'd say that'd be an easy way to put it. I went, I don't even know, maybe a month ago. I was at my friend's house in San Diego. He let me stay there. My friend Bijan.
Mm-hmm.
One of the days he took me out to see the sunset, and that was actually one of my best blissful days I've ever had. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, what brought me the most joy of it is I didn't bring a phone or anything. That was an experience I wanted to have. I didn't want to share that.
Mm-hmm.
My friend took videos of me. He took videos of me, but I didn't. And basically, I just looked at that sun, and all of me just disappeared, and I just became the sun. And that was the
Mm-hmm.
greatest experience I've ever had in my entire life, ever, ever.
Mm-hmm.
Greater than any relationship, greater than anyone ever saying I love you to me, anything like that. I became 100% inclusive with life, and that brought me the most joy. And whenever I'm like that, that brings me the most joy, regardless of what I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing. If I'm helping someone do something, or I'm simply sitting in a room,
Mm-hmm.
as inclusive as I can be, the happiest I am.
Mm-hmm.
I
Be
don't
the
even,
sun
I
in
know
your
that.
own world is the moral of the story.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Be your own sunshine. I love
Right,
that.
right.
I love that. That's an incredible experience. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
If I can speak from my own, what motivates me or brings me joy? I think for me, it's living with utmost integrity that brings me the most joy, and
Yes.
seeing how living through integrity has and continues to bring people and things that align with who I am into my life. I feel like when I chose a life of just authentic Mariana, as I am presenting myself to you right now, the people and opportunities and things that aligned with that vision of myself and my goals and my values very quickly became to come into my life. And now I feel like I look around at my world and I'm surrounded by everything and everyone I would ever want. And the idea that by continuing to live along that path, I'm learning from myself and from the people that are coming into my life that are meant to for a reason, whether I perceive them as healthy for me or not, is really cool. So I think that's what brings me the most joy and motivation.
Oh, wait, motivation was part of that question?
Motivation was part of that question.
Ah, shoot.
I guess I
Okay.
didn't really answer that either. So you go. What motivates you, Micah? I didn't really answer that either.
It's a pretty simple philosophy that I've started to apply. This is the most motivating thing in the world. It's the belief that everything that happens to me is the best possible thing that can happen to me. That is as motivating as it gets.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
motivation that doesn't go away. Because that means anything in your life, any experience that is meant to benefit you as a person. Literally. And that's just pure motivation for me. That's all.
Period. I love
Yes.
that. I love that.
Yes.
I think it's also the most liberating thing, right? Like when something genuinely so bad is happening to you and you look at it from that lens, it's going to be, I mean,
You're
easier said than
smiling. You're
done, but
literally
you're
smiling.
you're smiling, and you know that, you know, there is a calm after the storm. So
Mm-hmm.
you can get through it. You can get through it. I love that. If I answer that question, I think what motivates me is the thought of one day looking back on my life and feeling like I did everything I could to live it to my utmost potential. Like the
Oh
thought of
shit.
getting to
Yes.
80 years old, and I did an Instagram reel on
Grandma.
this today too, actually. The thought of getting to 80 years old potentially and looking back and saying, you know what, I could have tried harder, or I could have just failed a little bit more, or been a little bit less scared of failure, deeply scares me. So my goal is to get to 80 years old and be able to say I lived the best life I possibly could, or to my deathbed at least, and say I lived the best way I possibly could.
Love
So
it. I love that answer. There you
thank
go.
you. Thank you. Third and final question. How do you stop people pleasing?
Oh, ho,
Oh.
ho, 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 shit. Wow.
It's a big one.
First step is you got to become aware of it. You got to know what it is, right? Most people don't even know what that
Mm-hmm.
is. Like
Yeah.
saying yes all the time or putting people before yourself, that's people pleasing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Surrounding yourself with people you don't like, that's people pleasing. Seeking
Mm-hmm.
approval is people pleasing. There's so many aspects of people pleasing, but those are like, that's just four, and those are probably the most common, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got to be aware of the behaviors that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Awareness, you can't change anything unless you're aware of it. You can't. It's
Mm-hmm.
impossible, right? Because it's like, what the fuck are you changing? You don't know what it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'd probably say after that is lots of self-respect, boundaries, and self-love. Those are the three things I'd say. They're all the same thing, but like it's instead of channeling that energy into wanting people to like you, right? And to always saying yes to everything, it's channeling that energy into yourself
Mm-hmm.
and into things that you like. And then surrounding yourself
Mm-hmm.
with people that also like those things. That will help you
Mm-hmm.
kind of get out of the people pleasing technique. Another thing, I was talking to my friend actually last weekend as well. I had a very busy weekend thinking about it.
Very nice.
Well, that was also a problem though, because I wasn't able to like pour love into myself, so I became empty. Yeah,
Gotcha.
but
Mm-hmm.
I'm like much better now. Just
Mm-hmm.
need a couple days. But what I'd
Exactly.
say is if you're mirroring other people, that's people pleasing as well.
Mm.
Like you
Mm-hmm.
mirror their personality, that means you have no personality. And that means that you were literally trying to get them to like you, like as
Mm-hmm.
much as possible by being them. And people like being around people that are like them for the most part, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say awareness and then shifting your energy from those things of wanting people to like you to yourself and into things in your life that benefit you and only you. And yeah, I'd probably say it. I think it's a two-step, quick, just a two-stepper.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like that. I think mine is it's more not like a three-stepper, but it's like a three-element thing. And actually the first one I would say is I completely agree with you. I think you need to be aware of why you're people pleasing in order to be able to fix the problem, because I think it goes again back to what we were talking about with the inner child stuff. So much of your tendency to people please is rooted in something that you went through when you were younger, potentially when you weren't aware enough to understand it. So the first the first thing I would do in that case is understand why you are trying to people please. The second element in my answer is realizing that you will never please everybody, right? People are always going to have something to say about you, to you, whatever it is. People, we are wired to judge other people, to try to put ourselves first, to please our ego, right? Like that's just how we're
Mm-hmm.
wired, unfortunately. And when very few people realize that, very few people make a distinction between themselves and their ego. And if you can, then you're doing a great job. Create a distinction between yourself and your, my boyfriend likes to call it the monkey brain, because like I
Ah,
guess that's where
yes,
we
yes,
the monkey
yes.
brain. When you can create a distinction between yourself and the monkey brain that is wanting the immature, temporary, and immediate satisfaction, you're a step ahead of your own brain, which is it's a pretty good place to be. And
Yeah.
again, to add to that,
Ooh, just layers on
this is
layers.
this is this is the last point. This is the last one. I'm gonna credit my mom for this one. So, little backstory: my mom had the idea. We just sent my sister off to college, and my mom had the idea of making her, I have a little, you guys can't see it right now, but there's a quote behind my bed with like a cork board behind my bed with all my favorite quotes. And I make sure to put it in a place where I see it every single day. And my mom really liked that idea. And she had the idea that we make one for my sister. And so my mom was giving me my mom likes the way I write better than her own writing. So she gave me a lot of the quotes to just write down to put on this corkboard. And one of them was, if you are looking for somebody to inspire you, just look in the mirror. And I loved that. I know.
That's good.
I loved that a lot, because I feel like so often we look, and I guess this is kind of related to people pleasing. We look externally to try to fill a hole or to try to motivate ourselves, and it results in people pleasing because we want to show other people that we are in control, we are disciplined, whatever that is. But man, the only person you have to worry about pleasing is yourself at the end of the day, right? Or making proud, at least, is what I should say. Not pleasing as much as giving yourself that satisfaction. So that's my very long 4-parter to that answer.
That was a triple cheeseburger right there. You got the patty, you got the cheese, patty, cheese. Bam! Take that in. Take it in.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Mikah, this was an absolute joy. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. Again, this is probably not the last time you guys will hear from Mikah, because I am very intrigued to have you back on here. There's a lot of stuff that I wish we could have gone more into, but in the interest of time, we had to, and in the interest of not sharing everything and keeping people coming back, right? Like you said. So thank you so much for your time, your energy, and your beautiful energy and your words. And I am very excited to have you back on here eventually.
Of course, I look forward to it.
Thank you so much, you guys, for coming in and tuning into the episode. I hope you enjoyed it and that you took so many things away from it. I know I certainly did. Again, if you're not following Mikah already, go follow him on Instagram and on TikTok. And if you want to hear more of him on the podcast, which I'm very sure that you will, it's not the last time that he'll be on here, you can follow the podcast on Instagram at aperspective.bymjpodcast to get all the latest episodes that are coming out, all the updates on the podcast, etc. And on there, you can also shoot in any of your questions, any guest suggestions. If you want to be a guest on the podcast, please message me. I would love to chat with you. So make sure to check out those social media links. Thank you so much again for coming back, you guys. I am super excited for what the season has to come, and I'm super excited to keep recording these episodes. And until then, I will see you next time.